Alright, ladies and gentlemen, today I will be discussing Jeffrey Dahmer. For those of you who aren't aware of who Jeffrey Dahmer is, here's a quick recap. He is a serial killer who killed 17 people during the 80s, during the late 70s, and with most of his carcasses, he held majority of them in his apartment. When he was caught, police had found multiple body parts, bones, and even a heart in which he said he was eventually going to consume. Consume? Yes, consume. Jeffrey Dahmer was also partially a cannibal. He would sometimes, not all the times, eat parts of his victims so that they, quote unquote, would forever be with him. Kind of weird, right? Yeah, very weird, weirdo behavior, creeper vibes, etc., etc. For those of you who don't know who Jeffrey Dahmer is, here's a picture of him. Definitely looks like a creeper. Looks like a nerd, if you ask me. Would not trust him with my kids. Would not trust him at a Walmart at 11 p.m. at night. Yeah. Also, to not further glorify serial killers, because that's the last thing we want to do, I decided to Take the L Dance soundtrack over him as I drew an L on his forehead and a penis and a flash in and out. Look at the penis though. I kind of personified it a little bit. I gave it a little top hat. It's like with like a little a tie, you know. I'm gonna try to zoom in, and I don't want to get banned here. But yeah, as you can see, he's kind of angry. Just got off his 9 to 5. There you go. Yeah. All right, now I'm gonna, I don't know, say negative. I'm gonna say negative affirmations about this guy. Let's go. Your glasses are too rectangular. Boom, roasted. You look like a nerd. Boom, roasted. Your mother never loved you. That's why she left you in the house with the broken refrigerator. Hello and good morning, my fellow friends. Today is a day that we discuss the darkest parts of our everyday reality. No, not the horrors that reside in fiction tales, ghosts, demons, and other dark entities do not compare to the mere truth that exists within the realms of the real world. I am talking about famine. I am talking about war. Ladies and gentlemen, I am talking about the evil and the killers among us. I am talking about the flawed psychological development that certain individuals have to undergo due to their genetic code and merely the environmental and sociological factors that they had no control over growing up. The ones that causes humans to kill other humans, does it make it right? Let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. When you see a lion kill a gazelle, does it make it right? When you see a human kill a deer, does it make it right? When you see that one McDonald's documentary how they slaughter chickens, did you stop eating a 20-piece chicken McNugget? Because I sure didn't. Does it make it right based off the moral and ethical code that we abide by? Clearly the case that it is not. We see humans superior and godly, but in reality, in nature, good and evil does not exist. It is only survivability. Where do those chickens go? Do they have an afterlife? Does it make it right? Ladies and gentlemen, we are humans. We are flawed. We are animals. We are mere mortals trying to find purpose out of this life. We all have problems. We're all crazy. There are killers amongst us. Not only killers, but rapists, stalkers with psychological problems that make them feel rotten, fallen soldiers at the bottom of the bottle because of repressed emotions that they had to box in, locked in cages, or humans by other humans, consumed in the doom that enrages other humans. But we keep losing our minds day to day on a daily basis. Wasted races, hate this, hate that, facing choices, voice in our head telling us, does it make it right? Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to talk about a man, an animal, a creature who was able to get a grasp of his own desires. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to talk about Jeffrey Dahmer. and these are his stories. Once again, so here is one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims' relatives, and this is her reaction on court. For those of you who have not seen it, I'm going to showcase it right here, right now. This was the aftermath of him doing all that he did, and so I will showcase to you. It's only 30 seconds, so.
Whatever your name is, Satan.
Which is a very valid reaction to when you see the person who murdered your brother.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, motherfucker. I hate you. That's out of control. Don't fuck with me, Jeffrey. I kill you. Goddamn it. Look at me, motherfucker. I kill you.
Good morning, Jackie, by the way. Hope your morning is going well today. So, yeah. Perfect valid reaction to seeing the person who killed you. And also, I feel like they gave him more power. I'm pretty sure he enjoyed that a lot, immensely, if you will. Rare photographs by him, his showcases his family, his old apartment setup. I thought this was kind of interesting too. So this is him and his family. Looks perfectly normal, as all families do, but behind every picture is 1,000 secrets. That is apartment. That is where he derived in, where he had tons of bodies. He was alcoholic. As you can see, his pants are unbuttoned, bro. Button your pants up. Oh yeah, this was his part. First, let's see how eerie this is. Look at his photo. He has Jesus Christ plastered on his wall. Nothing wrong with Jesus Christ, but that looks a little too neurotic for me. And then I don't know, it's like, it's art, I guess. Jeffrey Dahmer inside apartment. Note: security camera upper left, right here. Mounted on wall. Fish tank on left. How did I put this on? Fish tank on left, and Budweiser beer cans because he was alcoholic and loves to drink beer, as we all do on our days off. Jeffrey's interior apartment. Color version. Note: lava lamp. I don't know why we have to note that, but yes, left under picture. Note: I'm hitting shit. Note: violent and bloody symbolism of picture. An explosion of blood with an executioner's hooded image to the right. Jeffrey's apartment was very small and the rent was cheap. Interesting fact, I guess. Jeffrey always had money because he made a decent wage in the Ambrosia chocolate factory and he was a steady worker. On one occasion, Jeffrey brought a severed head to work. I feel like he just did that for power purposes. Like he brought a head just to do it, to see if he could get away with it, as he did. Left it in his locker. Right, first of all, that smelled like ass, right? At that point, like, because he worried that someone might. Oh wait, no. Jeffrey installed extra locks. Oh no. Jeffrey installed extra locks on all his doors because he worried that someone might break in and discover his little hobby, murdering people. What a little hobby that is. He spent close to $1,000 on an alarm system, bro. At that point, it seemed a lot easier to just not murder people, but he definitely had an addictive personality just based off the fact that he was an alcoholic. A lot of this was due to his upbringing, his family fucking his mind. I'm not saying that is a perfectly reason to kill. People can go to therapy. People were very weird in the late 80s, I felt. Like that was where the late 60s or the 60s to the 80s was like the time where serial killers just flourished. Alright, so here is a newspaper clipping that I will read here on the screen. I'm going to try to do it as entertaining as possible. Let's see how it goes.
A loner's morbid fascination. The recluse from the start of a burgeoning evil. As a boy, Jeffrey Dahmer kept the bones of small animals pickled in formaldehyde on a shelf in his clubhouse. He roamed his rural Ohio community for roadkills to skin and bury in a backyard animal cemetery where cross after cross was mounted with skulls. He was fascinated with taxidermy, and once showing a high school friend a stuffed squirrel, told him, I always wanted to do that to a human. Jeffrey Dahmer celebrated his 18th birthday, went to a senior prom, and killed his first man all in the same year. It was 1978. That year, his parents, Lionel, a chemist, and Joyce, a film company worker, were divorced after a bitter, quarrelsome marriage that left Dahmer shy, emotionally stunted, and socially inept. A loner, unable to bear loneliness. While he was still in high school, Dahmer's mother returned to Wisconsin with his younger brother David, then 12, leaving Jeffrey all alone in the house with no money, no food, and a broken refrigerator. His stepmother Sherry Dahmer said shortly after his arrest, his father said that Jeffrey had been sullen and shy since he was about 8 years old, after he was said to have been sexually abused by an older boy. Schoolmates at Revere High in Bath, Ohio recalled Dahmer guzzling beer before school. He was noted for faking epileptic seizures, causing loud outbursts, and drawing chalk outlines in the hallway. Back then, when kids at Revere High acted stupid, it was called doing a Dahmer. I gotta revamp that sometime. Put that back. During his macabre 13-year-old spree, Dahmer killed some of his victims by pouring acid into holes drilled in the schools while they were still alive. Sometimes he told prosecutors he performed sex acts with their bodies before dismembering them. He was motivated, he would say later, by sexual fantasies about control and power and complete dominance. He said he had to depersonalize each victim and view them as just another object for pleasure. The horror began the summer his mother left him alone. It was a hot day in June 1978. Dahmer picked up 19-year-old hitchhiker Stephen Hicks, took him home to his house, bludgeoned and strangled him, smashed the body to bits with the sledgehammer, and scattered the butchered remains in the nearby woods. Shortly after killing his unsuspecting father, enrolled him at Ohio State University, but Dahmer, drinking so heavily that he sold his own blood to buy booze, dropped out after one term. Dahmer joined the army and was posted to Bomb Hill, Germany. Former GIs remembered him as a squirmish medic who disliked anything to do with blood. He was honorably discharged in 1981, a year before the end of his 3-year hitch for alcoholism. He moved in with his paternal grandmother in the Milwaukee suburb of West Allis and got a job, first at a blood bank and later as a chocolate company clerk. In 1985, when his grandmother complained of horrible, unexplained odors wafting from the garage, Dahmer insisted the stench was from chemicals used to strip flesh from animal carcasses, a hobby since boyhood. When his father gave him a chemistry set and encouraged his interest in biology. Later, he would confess at the beginning in 1985 he killed 3 men at his grandmother's house. The skull of one of them, Anthony Sears, 24, was found in his ghoulish Milwaukee apartment. That grim 1991 evening was not Dahmer's first contact with Milwaukee cops. At least 3 times before, he had come close to being found out to start. Hey, Dad. In 1985, he was arrested for exposing himself. 2 years later, he was convicted of picking up a 13-year-old Laotian boy and offering him $30 to pose for nude photos. Although the prosecutor asked for a sentence long enough to allow him to be placed in a program for sex offenders, the judge ordered a 1-year prison term that let Dahmer go to work and receive outpatient counseling. He was released in March 1990 after 10 months. Later that year, neighbors called police when they saw Dahmer chasing a teenager naked and bleeding down the street. When police arrived, Dahmer convinced them there was a gay lover spat. The remaining of the youth, the brother of the Laotian boy he molested in 1987, were amid the carnage in Dahmer's apartment. Dahmer was not caught until July 1991, and after one intended victim escaped, still wearing handcuffs, and alerted police. In a prison interview last winter, Dahmer, the abandoned teenager, the loner who could not bear loneliness, was asked why he killed young men. Not because I hated them, he said, but because I wanted to keep them with me. What a freak, right? What a weirdo.
Memory. 17 and what he actually did to his victims. But because Jeffrey Dahmer was able to hide in plain sight for years, committing murder after murder after murder, he had everyone fooled. Judges, police, friends, even his own family.
Somehow they were very charismatic. I guess like when you're put to the wall.
Halfway, take a few steps back to go. You ain't got the answers, man. You ain't got the answers.
Me, dude. You scared the hell out of me. I mean, I do 25 push-ups in a little bit. Give me a little time.
Is how it really happened.
So this is the 14-year-old little Asian boy. This is the actual call.
A woman in an apartment building called police to say there's a young man running in the street without any clothes on.
Concerned neighbors came around him and were offering assistance.
You can see the guy recording, or the lady recording.
At that time, he appeared to be confused and disoriented.
She was really enjoying this segment.
Intoxicated.
I'm assuming this was old. Hold on, let me turn it up a little bit because I actually can't hear it myself. So this lady is trying to help this young boy.
Neighbors are there, the police are there, and everybody's trying to figure out what's going on.
At that point, that's very strange, right? You see somebody stripped naked. You're going to raise questions.
And had passed out on the couch of the apartment, and that's where he had left him when he had gone to a local tavern to obtain some beer or cigarettes.
Dahmer convinced them that he and Conorak had a consensual and intimate relationship and that he would take him back to the apartment.
Conorak is a little drunk. Let me take him back up to the apartment. Everything will be fine.
What no one knew at the time was that Dahmer had just met this kid.
He offered him money to come back to his apartment with him.
This kid had been
The $30. Okay, so this was an individual that he
was in a comatose state.
He was gonna pay $30 for nude photos. I'm assuming.
He revived, left the apartment, and was outside naked.
Dahmer's coming back literally from the liquor store with liquor and encounters the police with his victim.
She switched hands. Hold on, I'm kind of intrigued with her hand switch there.
He revived, left the apartment, and was outside.
Look at her hand switch.
Dahmer's coming back literally from the liquor store with liquor and encounters the police with his victim.
She's very steady with the camera.
To be calm. There was nothing to suggest that he was not as he was presenting himself to be.
So the officers go up to the apartment and they don't see anything that gives them pause. They see Conorak's clothes folded over the side of the couch. They see an apartment that's not out of...
If your back is against the wall and you have to save your own life, I'm assuming you just like, you're capable of coming up with anything just to put yourself in a position where you're able to survive.
The police see no reason to arrest Dahmer. They just say to him, take care of this kid, and then they leave.
Immediately after the officers left, Dahmer killed Conorak.
His 13th victim.
They escort this boy to his death, essentially handing him over to Jeffrey Dahmer, who proceeds to kill him.
Think about that. Just think about that position real quick. Think about you being in that position. Think about you're escaping the man who is about to kill you. You go to the one people that can help you, and they guide you back into this man's house to die. Not only is that fucked up, but imagine the harmful things that Dahmer did extra to this guy just by putting himself in that position. Like that is insane. Get out, you escape, you're free, and the people that are supposed to protect you bring you back to your own demise. Granted that not even then.
Was just 14 years old, the youngest in a family of Laotian refugees. He's the boy who was spotted naked and bleeding, running from Jeffrey Dahmer.
The investigation further discloses
that the police department individuals who responded failed to conduct a basic, proper police investigation into the matter.
If the police would have only checked Jeffrey Dahmer's record, they would have found that he's a registered sex offender.
That could have been it.
For sexually assault.
And he was on probation.
And it's almost impossible to imagine, but that victim was the brother of Conorak.
One of Conorak's older teenage brothers had been molested by Dahmer 3 years ago.
So
Imagine
the whole
that.
thing was full of some very strange, like, what are the chance kind of coincidences.
What police didn't know at this time, Jeffrey Dahmer was in the middle of a killing spree.
Damn.
If the police had gone into the next room, they would have found a dead body.
Even as police officers talked to Dahmer in the living room, the body of his latest victim lay just a room away.
He was so quiet, so reserved. You wouldn't have believed in a million years that he was a serial killer. Never would you believe it.
Dahmer was a master manipulator. And he probably got that way because he knew he had thoughts that were just too dark to share. And he began to...
Can never trust the quiet ones. His apartment was kind of chill, right? I'm not gonna lie. If I went to his apartment, I'd be like, yeah, this apartment's pretty dope. I would think the alarm system was kind of weird. Like, damn, bro, what, you have a one-bedroom apartment. What are you trying to hide in here? He had a security camera back in the 80s. It's probably, what, $1,000? I mean, as it said, $1,000. Nice little... You wouldn't? Crude plans for an altar. Ether and chloroform, what he would use. So I'm assuming this isn't too bad right here. This is just like... condiments used for cannibalism. In an interview, Dahmer confessed to eating 2 people and offered a reason for his actions. At first, it was just curiosity, then it became compulsive. He said he prepared them with salt and pepper and used condiments for flavor. While Dahmer maintained that he did not commit these crimes because he liked torture, he did admit to believe that his actions were extreme. I carried it too far. You carried it too far after you killed the first human being. Oh, yeah, look. I think I recall this. A sparse bedroom with a bloodstained wall and a mattress. I'm assuming this is where all the demon shit happened. Most of the young men Dahmer murdered... Hold up. Most of the men Dahmer murdered were lured into his bedroom under the pretense of sexual activity. Based on the bloodstained wall, investigators determined Dahmer had committed crimes in the room. When investigators then pulled off the sheets on the bed, they found that it was soaked with blood. I wonder how long he had those sheets for. Police later described Dahmer as emotionless when the perpetrator relayed the details of his crimes. Obviously, according to a Milwaukee deputy chef, yeah, he was a chef. Dahmer talks about killing people just as if it's like pouring a glass of water. A drill, a hammer, and a saw. In a 60-hour confession, Dahmer revealed that his ultimate plan was to have a lover in a zombie state. To achieve this, he drugged and mutilated his victims while they were still alive. Doctors corroborated his reasoning, stating that Dahmer's intent was to satisfy a sexual need for a not fully cooperative partner. Dahmer later rationalized that he had time restrictions with a 6-day work week and wasn't able to search for a totally compliant lover like the one he desired. So he worked 6 days out the week. 6 days out the week. Imagine that, working 6 days out the week and still having murder on the side. How is that possible? That means he would have to kill during his working days. Welcome back, Dad. A storage freezer to preserve remains. Pamela Bass, who lived across the hall from Dahmer, described the time she assisted her neighbor in cleaning his apartment to avoid eviction. There had been numerous complaints about the smell coming from 213. Bass maintained that Dahmer attributed the odor to an Bass maintained that Dahmer attributed the odor to an unplugged freezer which contained assorted meats his grandmother had given him. I guess that's a good lie, if you will. In actuality, he stored dismembered body parts in a small stand-up unit Dahmer planned to save the pieces for his altar and to thaw and cook on occasion. Portions of human flesh wrapped like meat.
Did circumstance drive Dahmer to carnage and cannibalism, or was he born to kill?
Interesting. That's the sniper killer. I don't know who that is. Got Jeffrey. Is that Sam? The Sam guy?
Jeffrey Dahmer was one of the most infamous serial killers of modern times.
Yes, sir.
His name is synonymous with mutilation, necrophilia, and cannibalism.
You think of the crimes that he committed. They're so horrific, you kind of think only a madman or somebody totally evil incarnate would do this. But when you talked with Jeff Dahmer, you just did not get this idea. He could be engaging. He could be bright, witty. He could make jokes. He was able to fool a lot of people.
People that worked with
they
him
all
had no
do.
idea that he was a violent man. This was part of the real danger of Jeffrey Dahmer. He could join you or
It's
me
like every
at lunch,
individual
and
has
no one would
another
detect
side to
that he
them
was
that
a
they don't
violent person.
showcase to.
Jeffrey
the world.
Dahmer on the surface was not a abnormal appearing individual. He was fairly good
Ability to
looking.
manipulate.
He was well spoken. He was articulate.
Never in a million years would I have guessed a homicidal maniac.
To me, he's always been really a tragic figure, which is kind of hard for a lot of people to understand. But I don't really think of him as, the serial killer monster. I just think of him as this kid who was spiraling out of control and nobody stopped him.
Jeffrey Dahmer grew up in the small rural town of Bath, Ohio, a middle-class boy from Middle America. Robert Ressler, an FBI behavioral analyst and the man responsible for coining the
Ed
phrase
Kemp.
serial
Oh.
killers, was called in
It's
to
Mindhunter
interview
guy.
Dahmer.
John Douglas,
His years
Johnny
of
Douglas?
experience interviewing serial killers such as John Wayne Gacy gave him a unique insight into Dahmer's mind.
There is no evidence with Jeffrey Dahmer of any severe mistreatment or abuse in his childhood. His mother had a mental problem. She was depressed most of the time. She slept
took a lot of
and
medication.
dropped out of family activities. The father was a PhD chemist and very busy and very intelligent man who spent a great deal of his time at work.
Pat Kennedy worked the
Unfortunate.
beat in Milwaukee for over 25 years. Back in the summer of 1991, he was assigned to the Jeffrey Dahmer case.
It's like we
and
all
spent
live
6
at
long weeks
work
with
more
him.
than we live
He
to
knew
live,
him better
you know?
than most.
He was a product of upper white middle class. He was educated. He came from a family of means.
Yet the fractures in his parents' relationship left a young Jeffrey feeling isolated. His interests turned to animals. He viewed them very differently to how most children look upon their pets.
He stated when he was a very young child, 7 or 8, he had found a decomposed squirrel. And the bones were there. He kind of took it apart. He said that he found a roadkill and he wanted to see what was inside it, like a raccoon or a dog. He brought that home. A dead dog that he found on the side of the road was hit by a car, cut that open and looked at the insides of that.
Jeffrey started to do
addicted to
this from
that.
a very young age. He would roam the surrounding countryside looking for roadkill to add to his growing macabre collection. His fascination with bones would continue into his adulthood, but he would eventually move from animals to humans.
As he got to be about 13 or 14 and he was coming into his
Especially at a younger age, damn it.
sexual awareness.
DC Snipers
that,
is from or lived in Washington State. I think,
had some kissing.
Were you
with
there
another
during that
boy
time?
in the neighborhood, and he realized that he
During
was
those,
attracted to boys.
the DC Sniper
becoming
killings?
aroused sexually.
I'd actually watched the documentary
and
on
the
that as
cutting
well.
up of these animals somehow became enmeshed.
Didn't they kill children? They killed children, didn't
So
or
what
they
he
were
did
afraid
as
that they
a
were
young
gonna kill
man
children.
with animals, he eventually did do later on in life with human beings.
John Bakdov first met Jeffrey Dahmer when they were at school together. here at the Revere High School in the mid-70s. John, professionally known as Durf, has since
He actually
created
drew a comic,
book
yeah.
illustrating his teenage years with Dahmer.
And they turned this comic book into a movie.
He had a pretty rough time here, as did a lot of us. He was a constant victim of harassment and abuse. He was beat up a lot, especially early on. Later, they sort of got bored with him, but early on, I imagine he had it pretty tough.
Dahmer discussed his childhood at length with Robert Ressler. This is the first time these recordings have ever been heard.
I was up visiting a friend's house, walking back home in the evening, and saw these.
It's Robert Ressler and Johnny Douglas. Johnny Douglas still alive?
I just had a feeling that something was going to happen. Sure enough, one of them took a Billy and whacked me on the back.
When we got to high school, it was when suddenly he became this
a lot of
freak.
killings or killers are attached to some sexual
drinking,
fantasy or desire of power. They kind of incorporate that into
erratic behavior.
The
By
development
this time,
and their
Dahmer
psyche.
had discovered
I
that
guess you could
drinking
say.
was one way to dull the pain of his confusion over his sexuality and his sinister fantasies.
And I'm sure at a younger age, he probably developed that at a vital point of his early development was to kind of, I guess, not necessarily sexualize the kind of insides of bodies, but kind of
obviously someone getting drunk
normalize that,
is not a
I
good
guess.
thing. Showing up
And
at
having
school
that
just
obsession
working
that he
blues.
further took
Jeffrey was a
into the
lonely
future
teenager who kept
with
to himself.
the killings that
When
he
he
did
did
with
become the center of attention,
the
it was
17 victims that
accidental.
he had.
Well, I was on the yearbook staff.
He used to aim
along
at
with a
kids on
couple
their way
other
to.
of my
Yeah,
friends.
see,
So
that's
we
what
would
I do
goad
recall.
Dahmer into sneaking into various photos for the yearbook.
I was there. He used to aim at kids on their way to school from a church parking lot on a field. The location was across from my school. The timeline was when I would walk to school. How old were you at this time? So you're 32, 12 years ago, 22. It's like 1990s. There's a chance I had a sniper rifle aimed at me and never knew it. It's kind of wild. Yeah, they were they had like a good amount of victims. I forgot how they even got caught. I think one day I'll probably look into the DC snipers again, as I did before. But that's kind of crazy. That's just like mind-boggling.
And one of those was the National
Fortunately,
Honor Society,
nothing
which
critical
obviously he was not a
happened to
member
you.
of. And when the advisor caught a look of it as we were pasting it up, he blacked his face out of the photo, which they then ran, which is sort of a symbol of his wasted youth.
It's interesting.
Just this blacked out face, the boy who didn't exist.
Jeffrey's complex character meant that whilst seemingly happy to fade into the shadows, he also felt a desperate need to draw attention to himself.
A bunch of us got together and raised,
Doing a Dahmer?
put a pool in of $35, I think it was, for him to put on a performance at the mall of his seizures and epileptic fits and various acts of weirdness.
Where he'd been caught just once during the time.
Durf
that he had
also
been saved.
remembers stories of Dahmer experimenting with animals.
I was middle
His
in
odd
high school,
behavior
walked
was
by the
evident
location.
one
Jesus.
fishing trip.
Pulled a fish out of the lake, just a little sunfish, and took out a pocket knife and slashed it to bits.
Did anybody like?
And my other friend said, "What the hell did you
Die
do that for?"
within that area that
I just wanted to
was
see
anybody
what it
shot
looked like.
within that area?
As a teenager, as an extension of his childhood fascination of dead animals, Dahmer began to construct fantasies of sex with dead or unconscious men.
See, he started developing
Dahmer told
fantasy. He
me
developed that
that,
at younger age.
On one occasion, he had seen in the newspaper an account of
Like
a
these
young
sexual
man who was
fantasies
killed on a motorcycle.
kind of drive,
And,
especially
he
at a younger age, can cause.
fell in love with the individual just from the photograph. He actually went to the funeral home to view the corpse, but he became so aroused that he excused himself into the bathroom where he masturbated.
This was also
That is
apparent
crazy.
in his fantasy of killing a local jogger.
He thought he would wait in the bushes with a baseball bat. This guy would come by.
It is.
and, he'd bonk him in the head, and he'd have this guy. And he actually said he went out and waited for the
Hello
guy
there,
who
boy
went over
toy.
the baseball bat, but he didn't come by that day.
The breakdown of his parents' marriage meant that 18-year-old Dahmer was left alone with his fantasies.
Boy Toy, I don't know if you've ever seen that Jeffrey Dahmer movie.
And his dad had already left, and he was left alone in the house.
But that's what the comics
The
are based
adults
off
really
of.
failed him. There's no question. His parents,
Or not the, that was the movie.
teachers.
The movie was based off the
You
comics.
were pretty upset by that breakup.
But I'm pretty sure you knew that.
I knew it was inevitable.
Yeah.
It was pretty obvious. Yeah, I was upset.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And
They
was
did it like
this
for
that led
practice.
to the death of
That's
his
fucking
first
crazy.
victim.
Dahmer told me that one fantasy that he had was that he would encounter a hitchhiker, and he would have a narrow waist, broad shoulders, a bare chest. He would not have a shirt on, and he would have very little hair on his body. He would pick up this hitchhiker, and that they would have a great time together and all sorts of sexual adventures. He was driving down the road, and he saw his fantasy hitchhiker.
Interesting.
The subject of Dahmer's
Stephen
fantasy
Hicks?
was 16-year-old Stephen Hicks.
Yes, sir.
Hicks was a free spirit who was hitchhiking to a summer festival. This was a common form of transport in 1970s Ohio. Little did Hicks know who he would encounter in this car.
He brought the guy home. They had access to alcohol. They were
Locked
drinking.
him
They
in.
got a little intoxicated. But when the guy wanted to leave, Jeff did not want him to leave. He wanted him to stay because he was lonely and also he was intoxicated. He said that when he tried to stop the guy from leaving, a little bit of a wrestling match broke out. And as they were wrestling around, that's when Jeff grabbed the hand
Wrestling.
barbell and smashed the guy in the head.
Wait, time out.
Now he said when he hit him,
They're just wrestling around, completely normal.
that when he tried to stop the guy from leaving, a little bit of a wrestling match broke out.
What a
As they
time
were-
out. This guy keeps saying
He brought the guy
wrestling.
home. They had access to alcohol. They were drinking. They got a little intoxicated. But when the guy wanted to leave,
At some point, all right,
Jeff
bet
did not
I gotta
want him to
leave.
He wanted him to
I gotta
stay 'cause
go.
He was lonely and also he was intoxicated. He said that when he tried to stop the guy from leaving, a little bit of a wrestling match broke out. And as they were
Wrestling?
wrestling
Yeah, they were
around, that's when
wrestling.
Jeff grabbed the hand barbell and smashed the guy in the head. Now he said when he hit him, he wasn't thinking, I'm going to kill this guy. I just want to keep him here.
See, that's kind of weird.
Dahmer cut the body up and placed it in black bin liners. He loaded them into his car and was planning to dispose of them.
He had
when was stopped by a
abandonment
police officer
issues
for a minor traffic offense.
due to his mother leaving him with a broken refrigerator.
As he was writing him
His
a
father
ticket,
leaving too. They just fucking
came
left
back
him.
to get
They
the
left
ticket for
him.
crossing the yellow center line. He like any police officer, he took his
Not only was
flashlight
it
and
due to
flashed
his
inside the
psychological
car to see if
issues that
there
he
were any
had,
weapons or any
due to his like
contraband
mother
like
being
that.
depressed and
And he
all, but it was
saw
also
5
based off
bags. And the guy
his
actually
parents and
said,
the
"Hey,
way
what's
they
that
raised
back
him.
there?" And he said, "Oh, that's just some trash. I was going to take to the dump. I just didn't get there yet." And the cop gave him the ticket for crossing the center line and left.
This was the first of the many missed opportunities when Dahmer could have been stopped.
I just didn't get there yet. And the contraband, like any good cop. And he saw the 5 bags. And the guy actually said, "Hey, what's that back there?"
So the
And he
cop
said, "Oh, that's
stopped
just some
him.
trash. I was going to take to the dump. I just didn't get there yet." And the cop gave him the ticket for crossing the center line and left.
This was the first of the many missed opportunities when Dahmer could have been stopped.
Wow.
This is Dahmer's house. This is where he killed his first victim.
They're eerie.
He took it into this crawl space and apparently stripped the flesh off the bones underneath there.
Stripped the flesh.
And when the cops went in
off the
there,
bones.
turned this light on, and the whole thing lit up. Ceiling, floor, walls, everywhere. Just covered in dried blood.
He then smashed the bones up with a sledgehammer, stood in the middle of the woods, and spun in a 360-degree circle, throwing the remains as he turned.
Huh?
He said for the next couple of weeks, he'd read the paper every day to see was there anything about this guy missing or anything. Never did.
He was a
So
hitchhiker.
he realized,
Unfortunate.
I got away with murder. I killed somebody and nobody knows about it. I'm gay and nobody knows.
What does that have to do with anything?
Again,
That was
from
random.
the very beginning. More secrecy
Oh.
became part of his life. It also tortured him. And that's kind of how it started, and then it just grew from there.
It would be 9 years before Dahmer would kill again. Once he
threw
did,
that in there.
he would be unable to stop.
Happy Pride Month.
Jeffrey Dahmer began to drink heavily after enrolling in college. His attempt to lead a normal life was not going according to plan.
After he had flunked out of Ohio State for being drunk and then got kicked out of the Army, he had a short stint down in Florida. Didn't last very long.
With no job and no skills, but consumed with a desire to kill again, Dahmer went to live with his grandmother in Milwaukee, Wisconsin,
did do
trying
that.
to find solace in religion.
And he said when he first came to West Dallas,
That's what everybody does that try to
church
repent
on
for the sins.
Sundays. He tried to
They
read
try
the
to repent through
Bible.
religion.
He totally,
but in
didn't do
reality,
anything
it won't.
homosexual. He didn't try to.
How far
get
is that going to
involved
take you?
with
You know,
any kind of gay stuff. He said he
especially
really
when the
thought
desires are
this is
always
the
going
way
to
go.
continue.
Religion is going to be my savior.
Religion's not going to be
For
the
a while,
savior. It has to
Dahmer was
be
able
through
to
therapy
control
and
his
through
urges. However, this proved to be the calm before the storm.
understanding the source, I guess.
Thing that tipped the balance for him was he was at the Wauwatosa Library.
Wauwatosa.
As he was sitting there reading a book, a young man walked by him and threw a crumpled up piece of paper in front of him.
Oh, shit.
And walked by. And Jeff took it,
Said
opened
nerd.
it up, and inside it said, if you want a blowjob.
What?
Do you think that note throwing thing was kind of a catalyst, kind of a trip off?
It seems that way to me. Because that's when everything started falling apart.
What did that mean to you? I mean, this thing.
It just was just sitting there, sort of throwing out a challenge to whoever, and sure enough, it started falling
You didn't
apart.
go. You didn't follow the guy. You didn't meet up with him. He said
Interesting.
that set the stage for
Set the stage.
seeking more contact from a sexual side with young men, and that led to homicide, and that went on 17 more times.
Incapable of relating to people, but desperate for his own brand of necrophilic sexual contact. In 1985, Dahmer started to hang out in gay bathhouses, where he would take his partner to a cubicle and drug them.
He was a very selfish lover. He wanted to be the giver. He did not want to be the receiver of homosexual sex. Actually,
the pitcher.
He enjoyed oral and anal sex, but did not want anyone to perform anal sex on him.
Sex for Dahmer was a matter of obtaining
he
and
was a
exercising
top.
physical control of his partner. But when word got around that he was drugging young men, he was banned from the local homosexual hangouts, so resorted to using hotels.
Jeff met an individual at a tavern, and
He would drug
convinced him
them,
to
so he-
come back where he had a room here at the Ambassador Hotel. And he brought the gentleman back to his hotel, drugged him with the drug-alcohol combination. And then Jeff himself, according to, he blacked out. When he woke up in the morning, this person was lying next to him dead. And
He blacked out.
was beaten about the face and the chest and the body. And Jeff figured that he did kill him, but he didn't, he couldn't remember doing it because he was in an alcoholic blackout.
Oh,
He
okay.
went to,
That makes sense, actually.
Department store across the street, and he
Makes
bought
a lot of sense.
very large suitcase, or a small trunk, if you will, and brought it up to the room and put the body in it, and actually had the hotel busboy help
All
him
these are
bring
just like
the
clear signs.
body down to the street where he hailed a cab. The cab driver helped him load it into the cab.
The trash bags
said,
of the police,
Dahmer,
suitcase.
This is really heavy, buddy. What do you
It's
got?
really
here,
heavy,
a
my dude.
body? And Dahmer said, "Yeah, I do." And they both laughed about it. After
That's funny.
the ambassador one that was
Woo!
that, did you find that pleasurable, or was that equally frightening? Yeah. For what reason was that one frightening?
Because it was totally unplanned. It was a total surprise to me that it happened.
That it happened. Yeah.
For the people of Milwaukee, it was just the beginning of a killing spree that would last 5 years.
5 years.
District Attorney Michael McCann remembers the time well.
Dahmer killed 16 young men between 1987 and 1991. We had no
How many
idea
people?
that a serial slayer was operating in our city.
And it was a total
a surprise to me, but it happened. Yeah.
For the people of Milwaukee, it was just the beginning of a killing spree that would last 5 years. District Attorney Michael McCann remembers the time well.
Dahmer killed 16 young men
16?
between 1987 and 1991.
In
We
4
had no
years, man?
idea
That
a
is...
serial slayer was operating in our city.
Those
From
are high
this moment
numbers
onwards,
for a
Dahmer
4-year
continued to
span.
kill. Sometimes
That's
there would be
crazy.
months, weeks, or even just days between his killings. After already killing 4
he was
men
addicted.
in August 1988, Dahmer made a fatal mistake. His 5th victim escaped. The police were called, and Dahmer was arrested for molesting and taking photographs of a 13-year-old boy.
The
With
Laotian
police
boy.
and the court unaware of his grisly death toll, he was sentenced to do only 12 months in a low-security prison. His defense
12
lawyer
months
was
is actually a long
Gerald
time.
Boyle.
He had to spend first year in a very, very uncomfortable environment of the county jail, where he could only get out to go to work, and a very hard way to serve time. So the judge gave him this very strong sentence, but nobody could guess. He had already killed 4 people by that time.
Dahmer's sentence was reduced after he made a desperate plea to the court, stating that what he did was deplorable and assuring the judge that it would never happen again. But it soon would. Dahmer needed to get his own place. He moved from his grandmother's house to flat 213 Oxford Apartments.
So here's the
That's where the
building
magic happened.
where it used to be, and now the city has done nothing with this. Absolutely nothing. It just sits there fallow.
So that used to be an apartment complex.
Now the building was in this design. It was a rectangle, 3-story, white stucco, 36-unit apartment.
I like this guy. This
Behind
guy's really
door
going deep
was
into
a place
detail.
for Dahmer to fulfill his fantasies and commit horrendous acts on others. A place of death and
Put a
destruction.
door up.
He would pick up many of his victims from gay bars.
This area here is pretty much where kind of the gay area kind of starts. This place right here, 219, was the place he liked to go for the, they would have the drag shows. Right next to it, C'est La Vie was another one of his favorites. As we go this way, there's a couple. Now, he was considered kind of a honey. I mean, he was a nice looking guy. I mean, people thought he was nice looking. And like I said, I wish I could be as lucky with women as this guy was with men. I mean, he got laid a lot. And he didn't kill everybody that he was sexually involved with.
Local bartender Tony Timer remembers Dahmer
I
well.
wonder how he would decide that. Ooh, insight.
Come to the back bar and he'd order a drink and he'd get a drink and he'd go and he'd sit in the corner. He was in his own little world, like he was always waiting for something, which obviously he was. Now,
It was here that Dahmer met Tony's good friend, Eddie Smith.
Eddie was such a wild, crazy person, so you couldn't help but like him, which, Dahmer did. And so they knew each other real well, well enough to make him comfortable enough to go into a house and take photographs.
Eddie dreamt of becoming a model, and Dahmer knew all the right things to say. At
Interesting.
$100 a session, it was easy money.
Eddie would be sitting at the
$100
bar,
a
and all of a
session.
sudden, sometimes he would turn around and say, I gotta go, gotta make some money. And I'm like, where are you going? And he'd just turn around and look towards the hallway, and I'd see Jeffrey standing right there. And I'm like, oh, you're going. Okay. Well, call me when you're whatever,
On Wednesday, the 24th of June, 1990, Eddie met up with Dahmer and was seen dancing with him at the Phoenix Club.
He just left with Dahmer and never came back.
It was only at the trial years later that Tony realized that the same quiet man who used to drink at the end of his bar was the same man who had brutally murdered his friend.
The community was shattered, people stopped coming out. That blew my life apart. It didn't just affect my life.
But it wasn't just the gay community that Dahmer targeted. He was an opportunistic killer who was always on the lookout for potential prey.
One of his victims was in the bus stop right here. Right up here is a young man
I like his stash.
from Upper Michigan who was just down here
Check your
visiting.
thick stash like that.
And Jeff Dahmer met him in the bus stop right over there in front of that McDonald's. and convinced him to come home with him. That was the end of that guy.
Some of the men that he victimized were homosexual, some were not. He would approach them and suggest that he'd like to take pictures of them and would come to his apartment. He had already prepared at that apartment a drug that he would induce them to drink.
He said once he snapped the lock on the door and the person was in his apartment, he seemed to become more aggressive, more powerful. It was almost like a psychological transformation, and he became more sexually aroused.
He would lay listening to their heart, and he trained himself to learn when they were coming out of the drug-induced coma by their breathing, because it would start to get kind of sharp and short. From
It's
the
like he was
long
intrigued.
breathing
Oh my God.
drug-induced. And that's when he knew it was time to kill them.
He would then perform oral sex on them before strangling and dismembering
Every 2
them,
minutes.
and often keeping his favorite body parts around his flat for days on end.
Sometimes he would have sex with
He
the
enjoyed the
individual
anatomy
as they
of the
were
human body, or
unconscious, but
just
always after they were
bodies
dead
in
as
general.
well. So it became, I think the preference was for the dead person, because
Seems like he sexualized the human body.
With conversation, he didn't have to deal with
whoa, buddy,
denials or rejections. It was strictly on his own turf at that time. He had all of his victims back at his apartment, where he would be able to enjoy himself by going through the rituals that he needed to perform. Acts of sexual activity combined with destruction of the bodies.
He would come back.
Was
from
that a
work and
penis?
make love with the dead body. He would sleep with it. He would lie with it. He would rub it and have sex with it.
He was just very, very enamored with the concept of opening a body, seeing the internal organs spill forth, and
like he
several
enjoyed
of the
that.
bodies he would put in his bathtub and pack with ice in midweek, because he had to work the next day, so he could keep them for the weekend, where he'd have more time to enjoy himself with his bodies. He said to do that, he'd have to shower with cold water so he wouldn't melt the ice. It was uncomfortable. It was well worth it.
One way to understand
What a
Dahmer's obscure
fucking
fantasy
freebird.
world is to talk to someone who shares Dahmer's interest in death and bodies. Nico Klaus is better known as the Vampire of Paris. A convicted cannibal and murderer, Klaus killed a man in cold blood in October 1994.
Why are you still walking the streets,
he
my
served
guy?
just 7 years in prison and is now free to walk the streets.
So I can really relate to somebody.
What?
Like that. I can understand what went through his mind and what his obsessions were.
Interesting. What's going through his mind, my guy?
He was really concerned with the aesthetics of
Uh-huh.
death.
Yes.
How beautiful they looked like in his eye. This is why he took photographs of his victims. He would pose them in twisted positions.
Yeah, what was the idea of posing there? It was just a way to exhibit control, a way I wanted them to look, and to accentuate the procedure. Keeping these photographs then was important to you as well. I'd use them for translation. Yeah, and you had a lot of them.
It continued on and grew in momentum, that the passions and the lust became stronger. His want to look for this perfect orgasm, I guess you could call it. He had to do more and more things in order to have this satisfying orgasm. It just started with having pornographic, homosexual sex, and then actually having homosexual sex with people in the baths, and then having sex and killing, and then having sex with their dead bodies, people, and then having sex with the viscera, and then actually eating the people that he had sex with, to get this.
He needed that eternal satisfaction, that
superb orgasmic experience.
How does a human being
climax
get to the point
that you can
they
never
only
reach?
Eat the flesh of another? Only another cannibal can truly know. Nico was working as a mortuary assistant at a Parisian morgue when he tried human flesh for the first time.
There is a state of euphoria.
Did he change?
Right?
I mean,
after you have done it, you really feel on a
this
big
guy
high,
was in prison for 70 years.
and you are like on the top of a mountain.
During the dismemberment of the saved heart, muscle beat, leg, arm, bicep, liver, cut it into small pepper pieces, washed it off, put it in these clear plastic freezer bags.
Yes.
And put them in my floor freezer. Just as an escalation, trying something new to satisfy. And I would cook it. And then...
and masturbate it afterwards.
Afterwards? Did that have any positive effect to that ritual? It satisfying?
It made it feel like they were more part of me.
What he did was he bought a adaptable.
The thing about Jeffrey Dahmer is he wasn't mentally insane, which,
he said he would just
or not insane necessarily.
Sear it on both.
What I recognize is that Jeffrey Dahmer, I believe he had a high IQ. Right? A lot of these serial killers have the tendency to have a decently ranked IQ. They're not idiots. They're not... I mean, if they were willing to get away with it for so long... Hold up. I could be wrong about this. It's showcasing me. Jeffrey Dahmer had 145 IQ. The normal range is at 95 to 105. Right? So he was above average in IQ. He wasn't dumb. He was just the psychological development at an early age due to the sociological factors involved pertaining to his family not really loving him the way that he should have been loved due to his mother having psychological issues, him being bullied. All these factors took into play to how he becomes. So I believe that the IQ is separated from the social inadequacy that he had growing up. Those two are separate. So regardless of how crazy or how kind of like this kind of like showcases a level of low IQ, it's like they're not interconnected at all. Was he insane? Yes. Was he dumb? No. I think he was just a man who was flawed due to the upbringings he unfortunately had. Not trying to give him... It's just truth. It's just the truth of the matter. It's how life is.
Sides with a little oil. You did add some condiments to it, some vegetables and mushrooms and onions. And towards the end there, that's the month before we caught him, pretty much the only meat that he ate was human.
Flesh tastes
interesting.
Like horse meat, in my experience.
Horse
but
meat?
Of course,
I've never eaten horse.
The part that you eat.
Ultimately, Dahmer wanted a partner he could completely control.
A lot of the reasons he had these kind of thoughts and were due to, so at an early age, we develop our kind of sexual gratification to the things we desire, to the things that we seek out for future growth, right? We develop these at a younger age. There are vital and critical points of the human brain development where these are very, very critical. They're critical moments. And I'm assuming one of his critical moments during his sexual growth in his brain was during these times where he would see the anatomy of these dead carcasses. He was intrigued by it. It kind of gave him this kind of arousal that he wasn't aware of at the time. Maybe there was a lot of things intertwined with one another, right? I'm assuming that had a lot to do with his sexual desire growing up, along with him being molested as a younger boy. I'm assuming that all these accumulative things caused him to have these sexual desires towards dead bodies, I guess you could say. Just me kind of free roaming right now.
Or alive.
He began fantasizing that he could make things much better for himself by creating a sex zombie. And the sex zombie, he thought, would stay with him, and all the time he would not have to murder anymore.
I wasn't getting the satisfaction from killing people. So I took it to a new level
He would drill it in their heads and put acid into their heads so that he could zombify these human beings.
Very quickly. And with a large syringe, I filled that up with resin, injected it. Filled it? Yeah, injected it. I was hoping to produce a zombie state.
So he didn't really enjoy killing individuals. It was a control he had over these specific people, and to kind of keep them there so that they don't leave like his parents did. So it all connects to an extent. There's always a source. What is a source?
In the mall when he tried out his new drilling technique, but he made the mistake of leaving him alone.
I saw him sitting on the sidewalk. Two girls were with him. They called the police. I had to think of the story quickly. They told him he was a friend. He gets drunk. He was not wanting to go back, so one officer grabbed him by this arm.
So if he didn't want to go back, why take him back? Why take him back? Why not be like, all right, bro, just sleep in the what with the alcoholic tank, the drunk booth, drunk tank? If he didn't want to go back, why take him back?
Yet again, like many before them, the police were taken in by the courteous Dr. Jekyll side of Jeffrey Dahmer's personality. But with the bodies piling up and a pungent smell emanating from his apartment,
smell like shit, I bet.
Before he would start drawing attention.
I'd get mad if I smell. If there was a killer in the bottom floor of me right now, and I smelled shit on a daily basis, I'd be pissed.
Complained about the smell.
Sir Pacliber Princewill was in charge of Dahmer's apartment building and had to deal with the complaints.
Somebody told me that it is coming from his apartment, and so I had to call him and ask him what's going on. Can't he clean up or what?
How did that go? I'd either blame it on.
Said it was pretty nice, so I'm not lying.
He said he almost passed out. What was in that?
3 headless toxins. Yeah, stripped.
The man who brought an end to Dahmer's reign of terror was 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, who after escaping from Dahmer was running down a street with a pair of handcuffs on one wrist when he managed to flag down a passing police car.
Ooh, he escaped.
Had the officer been able to unleash that handcuff, that may have been the end of it. So they went back to Dahmer's residence.
Jeff opened the door. They said who they were and what they wanted, but Jeff didn't have the key for the handcuff because he didn't. The way he got the handcuffs back from his victims was by cutting off their hands.
When they entered the apartment, one of the officers saw some pictures in a bedroom of a skinning of a human being, looked at the pictures, was surprised, then looked around the room and realized he was in the very room where those pictures had been taken.
John?
He yelled out to his partner,
I think we got a killer on the loose.
When I arrived, I saw Dahmer was arrested on the ground,
John?
handcuffed, and I was told by the officers to look in the refrigerator. This time when I did open up the refrigerator, what I found in there was an empty refrigerator with a cardboard box containing a freshly severed head of a black male. The eyes and the mouth were open. It should be stated that the interior of the refrigerator was immaculately clean. In the back was a box of Arm & Hammer baking soda, and on the side were condiments.
Were turkey burgers?
Ketchup, A1 sauce. And I felt fear from the bottom of my feet all the way to the top of my head. You can't make sense of anything that looks so bizarre.
Dahmer's killing spree was finally brought to an end. What was motivating Jeffrey Dahmer to kill, dismember, and eat his victims? Was he sane or insane?
Huh? Was he sane or insane?
Jeffrey Dahmer was just 18 years old when he took the life of his first victim. 9 years later, he was driven to kill again. It was after this that the killings escalated. He continued to kill, and for years he got away with murder. No one suspected the mild-mannered, good-looking, middle-class boy of any further wrongdoing.
In a long list of these, I mentioned the judge that commuted his sentence, the first police officer that let him go in Ohio. When he first got out, he was on probation, but not once during his entire time of being on probation did a probation officer come to his apartment, much less make a surprise visit to his apartment. Also, he was under court order to see a psychologist every month
And some of the days he had just killed somebody over the weekend and chopped them up.
How do you
and
have
threw
the
them away,
time?
and then
He worked a
sitting
6-day
and
work
talking to the
week,
psychologist,
having to
putting on
talk to a
front
psychologist,
and being
and
cleared
still
to go.
killing on a Wednesday.
This time was
how
different.
how did
They
you do
had
it, my
him in
guy?
custody, and they weren't about to let him out of their sight.
On a
Knowing
Wednesday,
that it was
of
all
all
finally
days.
over, Dahmer signed away his rights to an attorney.
Huh?
From midnight into the early hours of the next morning, he started unveiling the wicked truth
Nice handwriting.
behind his evil acts.
He didn't tell us about eating people right
It's a nice
away.
signature.
In the freezer part of the refrigerator, they found individually wrapped and prepared body parts: thigh, bicep, heart, liver.
As Kennedy continued his interrogation, the most pertinent question was why.
There was mental illness in his family, and that's not a stigma. I mean, a lot of our families have mental illnesses. The fact that there was a lot of arguing going on between his mom and dad and when he was growing up. The fact that he
Sociological
felt
factors, yes.
abandoned. I
Mhm.
mean, all these things together,
All these
could
factors,
they
yes.
produce? Who knows?
Had his desertion as a teenager left Jeffrey with a fear of abandonment that affected his adult life?
We had discussions
believe
about
so.
love because I said, Jeff, why don't you just have a regular boyfriend? You know, I mean, and then you wouldn't have to kill these people. He said, people
It was much
always
more
left.
than that.
I could never get anyone to stay with me. So I saw that the only way I can keep them with me was by killing them. But by actually eating the person, that this young man actually became part of Jeff Dahmer.
Dahmer did state that he was there was not a victim of his crimes that he did not personally love and would like to have stayed with on a permanent level. It all boiled down to the same routine. When they were going to leave, that's when they died.
Even Dahmer himself can't provide an explanation.
What do you account to the fact that you were getting into this so often?
The fact that I was desperately trying to make it so it satisfied what it never did.
But was it just a simple case of not being able to find what he was looking for?
And you met somebody who consensually would set up a living arrangement with you, would you have abandoned then the procedure that you stayed with?
I'm intrigued.
The person would have had to be totally compliant, willing to do whatever.
Oh my God.
It's just heartbreaking people like that.
That's true.
There was
Nobody
never
like
any
that.
doubt that Dahmer committed these heinous crimes. His 60-hour confession and the insurmountable evidence was to solve a complicated question. Was Dahmer sane or insane? If the court found
I'm
Dahmer
gonna look
sane,
up some of these
he would
photos
spend the
after
rest of his
stream.
life in prison. If they judged him insane, he would go to a psychiatric hospital from which one day he could possibly be released. Prosecutor Michael McCann had a different approach to the trial.
We have in Wisconsin what's called a bifurcated trial. We use the same jury, but we do it sequentially. First, did he do the slayings? Secondly, was he sane or insane at the time? So the second part of the trial was the real issue. That went on for several weeks in this very courtroom.
Dahmer called on his old defense attorney, Gerald Boyle. Boyle felt his client had to be insane.
Killing didn't obviously mean anything to him.
Well,
He
not
had no
necessarily
conscience.
insane. He did have a conscience.
So
about
he
this.
wasn't going to be rehabilitated, no matter
For anybody who's pursuing it in a sense
To
where
the average person,
they
killing
have
and
a
eating
plan,
another human
it's
would not be
obviously
considered a sane act.
Yeah, but it's
But according to Wisconsin's
still, what's
legal
the word?
definition of sanity, if a person knows what they are doing is wrong but keeps doing it anyway, they are classified as sane.
Yes.
Dahmer definitely knew what he was doing.
There's a certain word for it. What the fuck is the word? I'm upset that I don't know the word on top of the dome. It's I used to know it. Not negligence. It was like what to. There's a word. I took a. A mental illness for which can distinguish fantasy from reality. Are subject to uncontrollable impulsive behavior, yes, but insanity is distinguished from a low intelligence or mental deficiency due to age. So he wasn't mentally insane, obviously. But there's a particular word that happens when you. I don't know. I'm upset.
But he didn't care. He justified what he was doing by his own standards. He knew what was against the law.
I think after you kill a certain number of people, you've lost all track of
Yeah.
morality. You no longer feel constrained by the morals that bind most of us.
Dahmer sat emotionless during the verdict before the judge and the families of the victims he'd killed and dismembered. He was judged to be sane and sentenced to life imprisonment on the 17th of February 1992.
Someone asked me once, how many people do you have to kill and eat before you're insane in Milwaukee? I can say this, that everyone who
He
knew
wasn't
Dahmer,
insane.
and I think the most skilled psychiatrists, said Dahmer
It was too structured.
insane.
It was too
That is even more frightening than believing Dahmer was insane. I believe he was sane.
He was sane.
Tragically evil.
I felt that was a just end for what he did. He needed to be removed from society forever, for the rest of his life. And
he knew
and
it.
I think that's what he should have got, and that's what he got.
Of course, we had 15 verdicts of guilty and 15 verdicts of sane while committing the crime. And then, of course, the sentence of the court was such that so long, 900 plus years, that he would never be released. When Dahmer went to the maximum security prison at Columbia,
What's the
he came in
word?
contact with a minister or ministers and started reading the Bible and attending chapel there.
You're not being saved by the Lord Heavenly Father,
Faced
my
with
guy.
life imprisonment, Dahmer turned to religion once again for comfort and possible salvation. Eventually, he asked local Church of Christ minister Roy Radcliffe to come to the jail to baptize him.
After I agreed to baptize him, he heaved a deep sigh of relief because he was afraid that I would say, I can't baptize you because your sins are too grievous, your sins are too bad, your sins are unforgivable. Well, that violates everything I've ever believed, and I would never say that. Jesus Christ came to save sinners. Jeffrey Dahmer was a sinner. It's as simple as that. It was our first Thanksgiving
simply is
holiday
as simple as that,
so he
my
made
friend.
a big deal about giving this card to me, and it was written
Simply
out.
as simple as
He
that.
talked about how much he was grateful for all that I'd done for him and how thankful he was that I was in his life and I hadn't given up on
What's
him.
the best way to get into jail?
The
I'm looking at
only,
weird things on
emotion he
Reddit
ever
now.
had confessed to regarding
I can't
his
handle my
murders
life
was
anymore, but I
love.
don't
It
want to
wasn't
do really
hatred
bad
at all.
crime.
And I never saw a sense of malice or anger or hatred toward any of his victims at all.
In November 1993, 2 inmates were killed by delusional schizophrenic Christopher Scarver at the Columbia Correctional Institute. One was Jesse Anderson, the other was Jeffrey Dahmer.
Scarver got a piece of equipment off an exercise machine, crept up upon Dahmer, and bludgeoned him to death,
I actually do have a video to showcase this right here.
and then crossed a gymnasium and bludgeoned to death Anderson.
He knew
Just,
that
he was already on a
a
roll. Why not?
population. And talking to the investigator said that the gentleman that was killed with him, Jesse Anderson, had all kinds of defensive marks where he tried to stop Carver. But Jeff Dahmer had no defensive marks on him, that all his strikes were from the beginning, from the head. And a very interesting thing that I thought was interesting was he was killed with a hand barbell, which is the same instrument he used to kill his very first victim.
That is interesting.
He was a young man that I felt a friendship toward, and I'd
Everything
lost a
comes full
friend.
circle.
So I was very much in shock and disbelief about it at first.
I felt somewhat sorry for the man being beaten to death by another inmate. Didn't seem right. It's not supposed to be what happens in prison.
It did kind of shake me up a little bit. I don't know if this means I'm, not the macho guy I wanted to be, but
Macho Man Randy Savage.
I felt really conflicted about
Macho
it.
Man Randy
because
Savage.
I had got to know him, I saw him as a very tragic figure. I guess I felt sad that he was dead because I don't believe anybody needs to die like that.
People disagree.
He died pretty brutally, but you can't say he didn't deserve it. But still, I think at that point it's probably a relief to him. I would think that was no kind of life.
I was kind of elated. I was kind of happy. I'm like, well, good riddance. I'm glad it's over. That's the least he can do for me, for taking my friend. He didn't deserve to live, not after that.
Jeffrey
Not
Dahmer was
after that.
cremated immediately, although his brain was removed at the request of his mother. She wanted the brain studied because she's trying to offset the belief that Lionel had suggested that somehow his brain was deformed. About a year later, the scientist involved with the brain decides there's no abnormality with his brain.
Was Dahmer's behavior simply down to nurture? Was Dahmer not born to kill?
No, I don't think he was born like that. I think it's environmental. And I disagree. I think anybody who in the young age is the victim of abject loneliness is probably going to have serious problems in life of one nature or another.
Did he choose evil? Yes. Was he an evil person? I can't say. And I wouldn't say that about anybody, especially after I spent so much time with him and saw parts of him that were very much like you and me. He had cares and loves and feelings like anybody else. Did he have some? I personally thought he was crazy. You'd have to be crazy to do what he did.
I don't think Dahmer was born to kill.
It'd be
I
bad
think
shit.
Dahmer had the benefits of a good family, a basically good family.
Until his
a
end.
decent area in which to be
I wouldn't
raised,
necessarily had a good
educational
family.
opportunities. He chose not to accept them.
Whatever factors
didn't have a
led
good
to
family,
Dahmer's path of destruction, it will take the city of Milwaukee a long time to return to normality.
He scarred the city. He's done something that will probably take
His mother left him
generations
with no food and a broken refrigerator.
to heal, but for some people it'll never heal.
There we go.
Volunteer details that may be difficult to hear. I began by asking what he wanted from the men he picked up.
I had these obsessive desires and thoughts wanting to control them, to, I don't know how to put it, possess them permanently.
And that's why you killed them.
Right, right. Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to
keep them with
me.
Yes.
And as my obsession grew,
he was one of the few cooperative serial killers out there. Doesn't make him
skulls.
Doesn't make him better than any other one, any other body
is
that murdered
recalling his
people, but
monstrous past. Almost 2
he was very
years ago, in
compliant.
this little
What I noticed.
apartment in Milwaukee, police discovered the grisly remnants of one of the most horrible crime sprees in American history. Jeffrey Dahmer, an unassuming
I'm not gonna lie, he killed
chocolate
16
factory
people
worker,
in
would
a
eventually
span of 4 years. Is
confess
crazy
that
for
he
me.
had seduced, murdered, and dismembered 17 young men.
That is
He
honestly-
even ate some of his victims' body parts. He instantly became the center of worldwide media attention, a serial killer unmasked. There were protests and press conferences in Milwaukee as people tried to understand how this could have happened in their midst. How did Jeffrey Dahmer get away with murder after murder for 13 years? How did a boy born into a hard-working middle-class family turn into the worst kind of monster imaginable? In this exclusive interview, we put those questions to
February
Jeffrey Dahmer
1993.
himself. We met with
Didn't
him
he
at the
die in
maximum
1992
security
or
prison where
1991?
He is serving his sentence of 999
Or did he die in
years.
1994?
For the first time, he talks about his crimes and gives us
Oh
a
my God, he
chilling
just
look
looks- yeah.
inside the mind of a serial killer.
it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. When you depersonalize another person and view them as just an object.
Yes, sir.
An object for pleasure instead of a living, breathing human being.
He does have rectangular ass glasses.
It seems to make it easier to do things you shouldn't do.
The reason why Jeffrey Dahmer was able to get away with his crimes was
Trying to read
because
his
of just what you are
body
seeing
expressions.
here. Jeffrey Dahmer is intelligent and articulate. That is what makes him so frightening. But if you listen carefully to his words throughout this interview, you realize it is a thin disguise. You do sound, though, like the kind of person who could have said to himself, "This is wrong. I must stop."
I always knew that it was wrong, but
what?
After the The first killing was not planned. I was coming back from the shopping mall back in '78. I had fantasies about picking up a hitchhiker and taking him back to the house and having complete control and dominance.
So what does that even mean?
The hitchhiker's
Killing
name
them?
was Stephen Hicks. He was just
He basically
18.
just said he had
Jeffrey
thoughts of
Dahmer
killing
took
them.
him to his parents' house. There he strangled him with a barbell. He dismembered the body and hid it in a drain pipe. It was Jeffrey Dahmer who gave those details to the police in his confession.
No one had a clue as to what was happening for over a decade.
During that time, Jeffrey Dahmer joined the army and was sent to Germany. He was eventually discharged for a drinking problem and returned to Ohio.
Bro,
9
zip up
years
your
after
pants.
Stephen Hicks' murder,
It's embarrassing.
the killing began again.
What happened to you in the 9 years in between that you were able to stop, that you were able to control yourself?
It just wasn't an opportunity to fully express what I wanted to do. There was just not the physical opportunity to do it then. And I started, when I moved to Milwaukee in '81, I started reading pornography, going to the bookstores.
Back in the day, they had to
Eventually
read
that
pornography.
led to frequenting the gay bars. And then one time I brought this young man back to the hotel room, the Ambassador Hotel. Was just planning on drugging him and
What's up with him
spending
and
the night
drugs?
with him. I had no intention of hurting him. When I woke up in the morning, he had a broken rib here. I was heavily bruised. Apparently I had beaten him to death with my fists.
And you have no memory
I
of
have no memory of it. But that's what started the whole
Did he?
spree all over again.
I can't read
Dahmer
him.
says he snuck the corpse of his victim, Stephen Toomey, out of his hotel room in a suitcase. Then he took it to his grandmother's house, where he
Looks
cut
like
up the body
he's
and put
enjoying
it in
this kind of
plastic garbage bags.
when
media
you
exposure.
killed these men. Afterwards, were you repulsed? Were you upset?
No, at the time it was almost addictive. It was almost a surge of energy. I wouldn't have to worry about any of their
Rectangular
needs
ass
or anything. I
glasses.
just had complete control of the situation.
But Jeffrey Dahmer was out of control. The urge to kill had overpowered him. As police later learned, he wasn't satisfied with his victim's death. He wanted more.
Why did you photograph them?
It was my way of remembering their appearance, their physical beauty. I also wanted to keep if I couldn't keep them there with me whole, at least I felt that I could keep
Parts of them?
their skeletons.
That's weird.
And I even went so far as planning on setting up an altar with the 10 different skulls and skeletons.
And what was the purpose of the altar going to be?
As a sort of memorial. A point where I could, I don't know, it's so bizarre and strange, it's hard to describe. A place where I could collect my thoughts and feed my obsession.
When the bodies were still in your apartment, there was no time when you would see them and say, this is grotesque, what have I done?
There were times, but the compulsive obsession with doing what I was doing overpowered any feelings of revulsion.
This man, with a quiet, almost shy demeanor, became a master manipulator who was able to lure strangers he met at gay bars to his apartment. He was even able to con the police into returning a 14-year-old boy
That was crazy
to
to
him.
me. That is
After
still crazy to
neighbors
me.
called 911 upset that the child was in the street, naked and bleeding. Dahmer convinced the
First of all, a
police that
child?
he and the boy were simply having a lover's quarrel.
A little kid and you're a grown-ass man?
boyfriend of another boyfriend.
How old was this child?
He wasn't a child, he was an adult.
After the police left, Jeffrey Dahmer murdered that boy.
How can you tell it was
Connor
an
sent
adult?
us some phone. This man says he had a near-fatal encounter with Jeffrey Dahmer.
He wanted to take some picture of my back. He hit me with a rubber hammer on my neck.
He was lucky to escape because by then the
He just
killing
didn't
had
say
become
anything.
almost routine.
Before you went out to pick up the man, was there any kind of ritual you went through?
I'd go to the nightclubs,
Interesting.
drink, watch the striptease shows, and if I didn't meet anyone at the bars, I'd go to the bath clubs and meet someone there, offer them money, and we'd go back to the apartment, have a few drinks. I'd have the sleeping pill mixture already prepared. Person would drink it, fall asleep, and that's when they would be strangled.
Watching the movie Exorcist 3 was also part of his ritual. It put him in the mood for murder.
I felt so hopelessly evil and
He felt like he was Satan.
That I actually derived a sort of pleasure from watching that tape.
Did you like feeling evil?
No, I didn't. But I had tried to overcome the thoughts.
Interesting.
And it worked for a while, but eventually I gave in.
While Jeffrey Dahmer may say things today that make it seem like he understands what went on in his mind, he does not. All he can do is tell you what happened, but he cannot stop whatever it is that drove him to kill in the first place.
Do you still feel those same urges? Do you still feel that compulsion, that obsession?
I wish I could say that
It's so hot in my room.
just left completely, but no, there are times when I still do have the old compulsions.
Jeffrey Dahmer says
course.
as time went on, his mind became more and more
Just don't
warped.
lose those
Yet,
compulsions out of
he's
nowhere.
clever enough to continue to elude police
Takes
and
time.
lure young men to his apartment. We should
But
warn
even
you,
after time, you
the
still
details
can
are
have those
very
kind of
graphic.
addictive
I started having these
tendencies.
obsessive thoughts when I was about 15 and 16, and
Mhm.
they got worse and worse.
What were your fantasies about?
They were sexual fantasies of control, power, complete dominance. They became reality.
Was there pleasure in that fantasy?
There was excitement, fear, pleasure, all mixed together.
Jeffrey Dahmer fulfilled his fantasies by murdering and dismembering 17 young men. In time, his desires became more extreme, his deeds more grotesque. Listen to him talk about the most unnatural things in the most
Interesting.
matter-of-fact of ways. That's when you realize that none of it has touched him.
I was branching out. That's when the cannibalism started, eating of the heart and the arm muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me. At first it was just curiosity, and then it became compulsive. Then I tried to keep the person alive by inducing a zombie-like state.
Interesting. So basically, he was very sexually aroused by
injecting,
control, power, and dominance.
First, dilute acid solution in
And
your
then
brain,
soon
or
grew
hot water.
emotional and anger
And, it
towards the
never did
abandonment
completely work.
Could
when
someone
a
like
particular
you
individual
be
would try to
stopped?
leave.
Could you be helped?
No,
That's where the
I
emotional
was,
attachment came from?
I was dead set on going with this compulsion. It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
He became so warped by his evil impulses.
And he also had an
that he
addictive
even
personality,
took a
which
victim's
is
head with him
further
to work at the
empowered this
Ambrosia
kind of
Chocolate
addiction.
Factory.
I kept the mummified
The chocolate factory,
head
like Willy Wonka?
and skull of one of the victims in a carrying case in my locker at work.
Were you almost flaunting it?
Yes, but that's how strong
Yeah.
the compulsion was. That's how
He enjoyed it. He
bizarre
enjoyed the fear. He enjoyed the
desire was.
emotions.
I wanted to keep something of
person with me.
Oh, okay.
Jeffrey Dahmer exhibited some disturbing behavior early on. He began drinking heavily as a teenager, dropped out of college.
That was crazy, actually. I kind of see what he's saying at the moment. Like, he was so addicted to having that part with him that he had to take it to work.
Do you know what started it? Was there any kind of incident that you can remember? To this day, I don't know what started it. And the person to blame is sitting right across from you. That's the only person. Not parents, not society, not pornography. I mean, those are just excuses.
His macabre 13-year crime spree finally ended when this man, Tracy Edwards, brought the police to the infamous apartment. Like the others, he had gone there with the promise of money.
He was listening to my heart, because at a point he told me he was going to eat my heart at that
What
point.
the fuck?
I hit him, and I ran.
What was the turning point for you that made you suddenly realize that you had done something terribly wrong, something you should be sorry for? It was the night of the arrest. I have no memory of what happened during the 6 hours before the last victim ran out of the apartment. I heard a knock on the door, and the police were there with the last victim. They asked me where the key was to the handcuffs. My mind was in a haze. I sort of pointed to the bedroom, and that's where they found the pictures. And they yelled, "Cuff him." And I was handcuffed.
John,
and
you have to see this.
It was just the realization that there was no point.
So I think you're going to want to see this.
To hide my actions anymore. The best route was to help the police.
I thought this video was 17 minutes. I feel like it was like God. It feels like it's been 30 minutes.
Make a complete confession.
When it was revealed that most of the victims were black or homosexual, people in Milwaukee were incensed. Many felt that was why he went after them and why the police didn't seem to care when their families reported them missing.
10 of your 17.
I think that's partially the reason why he went for
It was not racially
victims.
motivated.
It wasn't
was
racially
not,
motivated, but he was
sexual preference. It was
aware of how
justifying
little people or little the
an
police would have.
obsession with the best-looking young man I could find.
While you just heard him say that his sexual preference had nothing to do with the killings, he has not come to terms with his homosexuality.
Never understood it. There was no use trying to fight it because I couldn't rid myself of it. It was too powerful and persistent. Do you dislike it? Yes, it's caused a lot of problems.
He looks angry. It's like that was
For me.
true.
A lot of conflicts and unanswered questions.
The conflicts remain with him, and so do his compulsions. But in prison, he finally cannot act on his savage desires.
Yep. Now he is dead. R.I.P. But not really. So yes, that is the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. I have really nothing else to say, but just that he was definitely fucked in the head, and he had glasses that were extremely rectangular. And that's it.